This video today is going to be Robert Duncan talking about super soldier technology, mind control. Now, one thing I disagree with, he says, well, these victims were he says these victims were. This is a very good old presentation, but it will tell you a lot about where they're going with this mind control stuff. But anyway, he says, well, these victims were experimented on, and but the plus side to them being experimented on, they've made a great contribution to uh, the world of mind control. And I just disagree when he said that. You know, he's trying to make an excuse for developing technology, and I'm not, and that's just my opinion, and I'm sure it's a lot of y'all's opinions because we're the lab rats, so of course it's not funny to us. But anyway, it's a good presentation with a lot of good stuff. Another thing I noticed going on in the community is a lot of people are starting, a lot of people who have a large following are jealous of other people who have followings. And so they try to start stuff, drama and stuff, and chaos in the community. And we shouldn't be doing that. You know, we should be the leaders of the community. There shouldn't be no drama. Oh, this person's got it like this person's got it like that. I'm going to tell you, beating the algorithm of YouTube was not easy. And But let me get back before I finish, and I'm gonna merge this video in. You're gonna get to see a good video of Robert Duncan. I probably haven't seen it before because it's an older one. So anyway, and so what's going on is, I guess these some people that have large platforms, and I'm not gonna mention no names, or a large following, or leadership, are throwing crosses at other people trying to get their followers to come to them and all. It's just a bunch of rigmarole that I'm not involved in, nor will I be involved in. I just think it's sick that this community's come to this, fighting amongst ourselves. Oh, this person did this person did that, instead of just trying to focus on the goal, which is to expose, get the word out, expose as much as you can, wake people up. That's the goal. It's not a popularity contest. This ain't T.I. Hollywood. And I really think some people think they're like Hollywood stars because they eat all this stuff up. This is serious stuff. Our lives are at stake here. Billions of lives are at stake. So that's just the way I see it. So anyway, I know Robert Duncan said that. It made me upset too, but there's good information to be gained from this video. And I'm gonna let me see. Let's see what Bible verse I turn to before I start. Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger or discipline me in your wrath. Have mercy on me, Lord, for I am faint. Heal me, Lord, for my bones are in agony. My soul is in deep anguish. How long, Lord, how long? Turn, Lord, and deliver me. Save me because of your unfailing love. Among the dead, no one proclaims your name. Who praises you from the grave? I'm worn out from groaning. All night long I flood my bed with weeping and drench my couch with tears. My eyes grow weak with sorrow. They fell because of all my foes. Away from me, all you who do evil. For the Lord has heard my weeping. The Lord has heard my cry for mercy. The Lord accepts my prayers. All my enemies will be overwhelmed with shame and anguish. They will turn back and suddenly be put to shame. And that's Psalms 6. I just turned to the Psalms. So anyway, I'm gonna stop boring y'all with my talk and merge this in. Anybody who wants to do a testimony with me or interview or get some word out on some information that they found, wants to come on to a Zoom meeting, email me at targetedtestimonies.pm.me. And that's it. I'm gonna merge the video.
I have to tell a joke first. Okay, who's a TI in the room? Do you know what that means? Sergeant Individual, raise your hand. Okay, who are the government agents? Oh, there are a few in the back. Okay, that's good. Okay, checking. They usually show up to these things. Well, greetings and salutations. Let me just tell you a little bit about my background. You probably read it on the internet. My name is Dr. Robert Duncan. I've had a privileged education. I'm a scientist from Harvard. Work for the Department of Defense, CIA, Department of Justice, almost all the three-letter acronyms that you can imagine. And so when I was asked to speak here, super soldiers, what does that mean to me and mind control? And so I took a scientific approach. So this is going to be a very different speech. This is from my background. I worked on the Soldier 2000 project, which is trying to make a soldier, a cybernetic soldier with a heads-up display, directional sound, and we'll get into that. But I don't like the word mind control because there's so many connotations to it. So I use the word cybernetics. And many of you people probably have read my book, Project Soulcatcher, Secrets of Cyber and Cybernetic Warfare Revealed. But it's about mind control and the technologies, the tactics, the psychology behind it and why they're doing it and what they hope to achieve. And in fact, at the end of this, when I'm done with my speaking, I'm going to ask the audience a question. First one to raise their hand that has the answer gets a free copy of my book, signed copy. So I got into, I guess you'll call it mind control or cybernetics, a long time ago. I worked on EEG control of robots, and EEG stands for electroencephalographic control of robots. So reading the electric brain waves and how do you make a robot move left or right, forward and back by just deciphering the brain. And the field of cybernetics came around the same time the CIA was initiated in 1947 by Dr. Wiener, I believe, and he coined the term, and it means governments, control of biological objects and machines, but he makes no distinction between the two. So cybernetics is really about melding the two, sort of transhumanism, if you will. We just happen to be made of organic molecules, but it easily could be silicon, could be any type of metal. And that started my investigation. I've interviewed probably over, by now, 900 experiencers or TIs, and I've been able, with a few other scientists, to categorize all the different effects that they are trying to find, how to control human beings, how to control their behavior. So it's really behavior modification. This is how it relates to super soldiers. A soldier is, you want them to be really sociopathic. You don't want them to have remorse. So how do you change the mind, create a personality that they won't have post-traumatic stress disorder after killing on command? That's a super soldier in my mind. And you got to use mind control for that. So that's kind of where I took this presentation, but I really wanted to put a positive spin on the whole thing, that even though we've heard a lot of bad stories about people who've been experimented on without their permission, it's important to also recognize the contribution that they've made for the future in humankind against their will. But there are a lot of good technologies that are going to come from this, and I want to share some of those. So first I'll get into the bad side, the military, the defense, and yes, we need security, and there are bad people in the world, but bad and good is relative. So I love this quote. I can't remember who it's by. I think author, someone will know in the audience. Any sufficiently advanced technology appears like magic to a lesser advanced civilization. So the military uses of mind control. Rand Corporation came out with the new warfare theory that wars aren't going to be won just by who puts in the most resources, and over time attrition occurs from whatever country, and they have to forfeit eventually. They said it's going to be based on swarm theory, where the soldiers will be able to read each other's minds in a hive mind, and you'll hear me talk about this, a cybernetic hive mind, where it's faster than using a cell phone or a microphone, that literally it's the speed of thought, and they'll be able to know each other's position and be able to swarm. They also call them Beowulf clusters, which is a computer term of high-speed computing theory. And so that's where warfare in the future, a super soldier will be part of this cybernetic hive mind, that he's connected to many other minds and knows what's going to happen on the battlefield and be aware with multiple people. It's pretty impressive and sounds very futuristic, but that is what they're experimenting on now. And along those same lines, they'll have distributed knowledge management. I love that movie, The Matrix, which demonstrates sort of this capability that if you don't know how to fly a helicopter, all of a sudden that information will be piped into your head and you'll be able to know. And so the information is distributed amongst many people, but they're still working for one objective. There are other uses that have been demonstrated through all my interviews, faster reaction times. The Air Force, for example, was using EEG signals to control a cockpit, and they're hoping to get just a tenth of a second, or even less than that, advantage. And now that can be body reaction times, that can be in the cockpit, that can be shooting a gun, recognizing an enemy, but that is a huge advantage. There's a famous trick. You can try it on each other if you want. You ask someone to hold their fingers apart and grab the dollar bill as you drop it through their fingers. They can't do it. The circuitry in the human body is too slow. It takes 0.19 seconds for the brain to recognize visually it's being dropped, and to the point that the motor cortex says close the fingers, so they can never grab it. Well, we're hoping to get a better advantage. And you can imagine why fast reaction times would be good for hand-to-hand combat and things like that. Personality simulations, I sort of mentioned that already, and that's certain jobs require a certain persona. You can't be caring and feel in war. You just can't be. So you can run different personality simulations on the human being. In the CIA documentation calls it the 7 dwarfs. So we have 3 cones in our eyes that give rise to the colors of the rainbow, but we only have 3 receptors. Well, it turns out that our temperament, our personality, has 7 levers, and it gives rise to all the differentiations that we have as people, but just mixtures of them. So you can create new personalities in other people if you can stimulate those parts of the brain. And other uses of mind control, demoralizing the enemy soldiers. So this happened, or it's hypothesized that this happened in Iraq in Desert Storm, because so many of the soldiers surrendered, that if you can cause pain, suffering, demoralize them, which so many TIs have experienced, if you can do that to the enemy soldier, wow, you've won the war before it even started. Now let's see, transporter technology, and this is going to sound a little science fiction-y to people, but eventually this is going to happen. That it's called EEG heterodyning, EEG cloning, that one person can be put into another person's mind at a distance. And you know, and then we'll get into the next thing, and I'll talk about that a little more. So there are many DARPA documents out there that you can research. It's remote control soldiers. So imagine, sure, you have nuclear weapons, your biological weapons, but if you can control the human beings that have their finger on the button, you're one step ahead. So this is kind of where it's going. You're trying to control your enemy's thought process, win their hearts and minds, literally take control of their minds. And that's the theory behind remote control soldiers. Kind of along the same lines are super spies. And very dark topic. You can read about it in my book. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I study programmed assassins and Manchurian candidates. How are they programmed? How does this work, especially using mind control? You can do it with drugs and physical torture, but how do you do it wirelessly? And so they use some of basically the same techniques, monarch programming it's called, and to cause trauma-based conditioning, split the personality, and program one of the personalities to go after a person. So how do they do that? And, you know, I don't want to offend anyone here, but so one of the technologies I worked on for the Department of Defense was voice transformation. And we used it in Iraq to fool the other colonels that their general was calling with their own voice. We had their phone numbers. They used cell phones. They didn't have anything else. And convince them to go another direction, totally against, you know, any logical warfare pattern. So voice transformation can also be used, unfortunately, in TIs that they're convinced their voice to skull, whatever they're hearing, is one of the relatives, their neighbor, and that's, you know, it's generally just not the case. It's using voice transformation technology to convince them to go after somebody who was not part of their targeting. And that's part of how you program an assassin, Manchurian candidate. MK Ultra, and people are probably aware of that term, the old CIA, you know, 1970s church investigation hearings. They want spies to have really good memories. You look at a document, you remember license plates, and a lot of the people I interviewed were going through these kind of experimentations, and they can increase the memory capability, but there's always a cost. If you add any sense to a human being, you're deprecating some other sense. And so, you know, it may be useful for their specific purposes, but it's not how us humans were evolved to be in a natural state. But, and it overexcites the brain. And if you overexcite the frontal lobes, it increases the memory capacity of the hippocampus, where most of the memories are stored. So it's overstimulation of the brain is one technique, and you can read more about that in my book. Splitting personalities and monarch programming. This is just such a horrible topic, but if you torture a human being enough, they often will create split personalities to repress the bad memories. And they found a way to bring up these split personalities and program them to do tasks. And it's often called monarch programming, very old psychological techniques, but they're still being used with modern day technologies. So mind control, wireless cybernetics, as I call it. And there are ways to enhance senses even. So by doing something similar, you can get people to hear certain frequencies better. You can sensitize them to it. You can make their visual acuity even better, such as at nighttime. We have rods in our eyes, which are for nighttime seeing, versus the cones. It takes about 30 minutes for your eyes to adjust, but that's our nighttime seeing. But you can actually do something even more bizarre and add senses to the human mind. So the Navy, for example, uses a tactile sensor on the tongue, sort of like Braille, but it's grayscale. And They give a diver a sonar imaging camera. They let the diver see the terrain and the subs and everything like that, and they're getting an image on their tongue. So they blind the diver, and the diver can see with sonar through this device, and the same parts of the brain light up as if it were his normal vision. So you can actually add senses to the human brain. We're self-organizing biological computers. Very impressive stuff that's going on. Brain bugs. No, you won't believe me if I told you, but there is a way through EEG cloning and it takes time, and it's not 100% accurate, but to see image, a lot of people call it remote viewing or remote influence, but to see through other people's eyes. But now this is all technology-based. I don't know anything other than that. And you can also cause espionage. You can cause them to have slight body movements. So one way, for example, of an interview I had, the cloner tried to kill him while he was driving by jerking his arms and trying to get him to crash. And that cloning actually happens to the other side of it to some extent. It's not 100%. You can't totally puppet somebody else if they don't want to. It's a type of hypnosis in a way. So super spies. What else? Passing and failing polygraphs. There were several TIs that told me stories how they were trained using this voice to skull, their handlers and so, to pass polygraphs. So imagine if the CIA always wants to do this. They want a program killer, assassin, who is ever caught, knows nothing about it, and can pass the polygraphs. And this is unfortunately just part of the dark side of our government. Every government has it. So it's not just CIA, KGB did it too, the Chinese, and everybody else. But that's a useful skill, and because the body's electrical systems can be manipulated, you can also force the person, let's say you're a TI, to fail a polygraph if they wanted you to as well. And then, I know a lot of people have talked about this, but there's remote interrogation and no-touch torture, and they're practicing this. Most people have done nothing wrong, but they need to improve their techniques. And so they get around the laws a little bit. We didn't touch them. There are no laws that say we can't harm this human being. We didn't do anything to them. So they call that no-touch torture, and it's just, legalese, because right now it's not recognized that these technologies exist, at least amongst the majority of people. And interrogation, this very fascinating topic, very deep. I'm not going to go too much into it. But they can probe your mind so thoroughly through associations and stimulation that they can probe it while you're dreaming, even. Dream programming and dream memory. So how many people, I imagine, I know some cultures like the American Indian culture really believe their dreams are from God. Very important to them. They wake up, they remember them. What if you could manipulate those dreams? You could control a lot of people. They would believe it. They would believe it, that it was from the natural source and not an artificial source. But there might be some good that comes from all this new technology that is arising. It's going to change humankind more than computers or the internet. It's going to be the next technological disruptive event when this is finally announced. And we see little bits of it as in the civilian sector, but the military is about 70 years ahead right now. So eventually, let me bring up a movie. Anyone see Minority Report with Tom Cruise? Yeah. So they sort of automated justice by preventing crimes of passion. And if you can read that someone is going to steal a candy bar, a child, well, you can give them a little jolt, behavior correction or alternative, or you can record all 7 billion brains of the planet and just rewind it and say, yeah, they committed the crime. Look, we have it here as proof. Now, is that good? You know, the ethics and morals, that's a huge debate. Do we really want to go there as a species? You know, obviously no privacy, no freedom of speech, nothing. But that is where we're headed. And so there are some correctional alternatives. I met a guy, a TI, was in Washington State. He could not leave his apartment for 3 months because every time he stepped outside of his apartment, he was brought to his knees with this incredible pain. So he was in a little GPS location, trapped, you know, home arrest. He didn't know what he did wrong. And then eventually it reversed every time he went into his apartment. So he had to keep moving. And a lot of TIs get that. They have to keep moving because, you know, the signal follows them wherever they are. The Russians, research says, the reprogramming of criminals. How do you reprogram them? Or should they be reprogrammed? But, you know, it can be done with this technology. Now what is free will? You have to start questioning that. What is free will? All of Western civilization, from crime and punishment to religions, relies on this concept of free will, but what if it's a mistaken concept? What if it doesn't really exist? We are biological computers and can be manipulated. And voice of God. So there are voice of God weapons, and you can see how that would be useful in war. You wouldn't have to fight. You just have to, you know, get on the microphone, pipe it into everyone's brain, V2K, as they call it. There are a bunch of technologies, by the way, that can send sound internally. But this is all lay down your arms. You know, people will believe that. People will believe that. But there are some trade-offs now. You know, all technology can be used for good or evil. So we can actually improve ourselves. The evolution was a very slow tinkerer, created us, you know, and fit for our environment, but there's always room for improvement. So given some of these technologies, you can do something in computer science, which people do to their CPU. It's called overclocking the common fundamentals, and in this case, human algorithms. So you can think faster. For example, you can react faster. And that's part of the experimentation that's going on right now in the public to see what are the drawbacks, what are the benefits. I talked about extra senses in Cybernetics. So I worked on a project at Dartmouth and borrowed NASA's heads-up display, and it was ubiquitous computing. Google's now coming out with Google Glasses that basically a similar idea, and you can overlap augmented reality. You can see images in front of you in your normal sight and sound and alter it. So, you know, I'm looking at Cynthia Hamill, and I know how many kids she has, where she lives, where she ate last, and I can ask her questions about that. Or, you know, whatever it may be. I don't like the color of the sky, so I'm going to change it. So that's the promise of augmented reality. I talked about the extra senses. So a lot of TIs talk about forced sleep, or they call it artificial caffeine, adrenaline boost. There are so many drugs the Air Force and Army have created so the soldier can go out and fight for a long time without a come down and be alert, and same with fighter pilots. Well, this is an electromagnetic way for the stimulation of the brain. Clearly would do less damage cellularly than taking drugs that they give them. So, and forced sleep, okay, you can actually wake up and go to bed exactly when you want to. Personally, I would love that. intelligence and knowledge enhancements. I briefly talked about that topic. That imagine that you are trying to change an engine part in your car. You'd be able to pull that up right in your head and understand it, then get rid of the knowledge. I mean, the human brain has its limitations and capacity, but this is a way to extend what we were born with and the knowledge that we acquire in a much more rapid time. Mood management. I could use that too. But so they're experimenting with creativity. So they usually say that theta wave, so it's delta, theta, alpha, beta, dominant brain waves, that the theta allows for the most creative mindset. Well, most people don't know how to put themselves into a trance and reach that state. This can be done artificially. Concentration, that's the alpha wave. That's what we want when we're working. It's about 10 hertz. And then relaxation. So mood management is a big application of these new technologies, mind control, that the military is working on. I mean, first comes, the Department of Defense, then comes the civilian research or applications, the industries. And that was the main reason that I wrote the book that I did, Project Soul Catcher, and I've done 10 years of research into this, is I was kind of tricked as a scientist working for them. I thought I was working for good. I thought I was creating something that would protect people and that had large applications in industry. I didn't know how it was going to be used on the populations, and for that I'm sorry. It was my naivety. But it's, I don't know. I'm sorry. But we, us scientists, we do what we do because we think it's the right thing to do. We don't know what our superiors are going to use any of the technology for. All right, let's talk about cybernetic hive mind and brainstorming. So it's interesting what they're working on, and I give credit to the CIA. They seem to be more interested in this. But they can do it between about 4 and 6 people. 6 seems to be the limit. They can create these melded minds, literally, together. And it creates all these new ideas. It's the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, literally terrestrial, meaning of the Earth, and intelligence. They're trying to increase human intelligence for military warfare strategy and such. When it comes to the civilian sector, that would be awesome. We're going to solve global warming. We're going to find all sorts of solutions. But that comes at a cost of completely overturning everything we know about our economy and our society, because intellectual property is a big deal. You come up with an idea, you hope to patent it, make some money off of it, get credit for it. But in these kind of minds, these hive minds, no one knows where the idea actually originated. It's all the same. So, and plus you can pipe it into someone else's mind. So patent laws are going to be turned on their heads in about 30 years. All of society will be when this technology is fully revealed and released to the general public. And then way into the future, about 100 years, I'll say 50 to 100 years, but only the rich will be able to get it, as silicon immortality. They're actually cognitively modeling the human brain, speech patterns, and all the things we consider our essence, kind of make us up, and being able to put it in silicon, run it as a program. And I'll talk later, the British Telecom can actually put it into another person. They're working on that. So capturing one's essence, what an interesting thing. We think we're infinite beings, but No, we're still finite. We're still finite. And so machines will overtake humans or will combine with them eventually. I know it's going to be a weird future. I won't be around. But, and then Vanilla Sky, have you seen that movie? That gives rise then to the possibility of being trapped in a virtual heaven or virtual hell until the sun runs out of energy. I'll try to look at the time. Hold on, I'll try to hurry this along. So efficient communications. Think about these technologies of mind control that are being investigated by the Department of Defense to create super soldiers. We could have universal translators. Literally, if you cybernetically hive mind mode to people, and it has to be done to you for you to believe it. You know, it's sort of like the Matrix. You got to see it for yourself, but it does exist. Universal translators that we could help prevent wars because the UN, imagine if all their representatives could hive mind. You can't keep secrets from anybody. Nothing, not your own, even deepest, darkest secret you can't keep. So they would know if the other country was lying and playing a game. And mostly it's always distrust that leads to wars. You know, the Iraq War, it was just distrust why we went into that. So it has applications there. Truth detectors. This is a far better truth detector than functional MRI and then the stress factors that they use for polygraphs. And then here's an interesting one, and it follows under communication, but empathy. You know, it's one of the best human emotions we have, love and empathy. And if you can feel someone else's pain, know what they're thinking, share that, imagine how closer you'd be to your loved ones. And it goes further than that. Medical applications, I may talk about that later, but you can, let's say you're a doctor, and someone comes in with chest pains, and you can clone with them, feel their pain, think, you know, hear their mind, and you feel that, oh, I've recognized this pain in the stomach before. That's just gas. That's not a heart attack, or whatever it may be. But there are medical applications for empathy. You know, I'll tell you a funny one that this one TI said that they were torturing him, and one of the tortures he would go through was that of menstruation cramps. They tortured a man with menstruation cramps. So he's very sympathetic now. There's another field that's coming out, and they call it neuromarketing. Right now they use functional MRIs to see what you'll purchase. What stimulates you? We're in a casino. They know us pretty well. You know, there's human animals, and we react. They got a lot of my money last night, by the way. But the field is called neuromarketing. And so you can imagine walking into a store, and you have, you know, buy Coca-Cola piped into your head. And they have a vending machine in Japan that uses a directional sonic energy that does say buy Coca-Cola, and you can only hear it if you're in front of the machine. And you remember that movie, it was in New York City, it was like Poltergeist. It's one of those movies. And they had a billboard, had this directional sound system. I am here, I am watching you. And it would freak people out. But that's a sonic technology. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about electromagnetic stimulation of the brain. Another great application is accelerated education. We spend so much in this country from raising a baby and educating them up through college. This will allow you to cognitively model your professor, literally, e.g., clone them. And you'll be able to learn 10 times faster and at a much cheaper rate. And this will increase the productivity of society. But these technologies, because of mood management and everything else, will turn us into very efficient rats. We can optimize the motivations for the workforce. which could be a good thing or could be a bad thing. I don't know. I'm not trying to judge. But you want to be happy at work. A happy worker is more productive. And so using these surveillance technologies and deciphering the brain, you can measure happiness and misery indexes. You can know on a scale of 1 to 10 how happy a person is at any given time. It even has applications in fixing autistic children, which is during development, the brains decide to rewire themselves in an unusual way, but we can correct that now. We can correct that. Deafness. Well, people have V2K. You obviously can pipe in voices and people can fix that. And blind children, some people are able to clone the vision, remote viewing, onto somebody else. So you can fix blindness just using these very secret technologies. And then we get to the dark side again. Political control. They're obviously doing this now. The people who say anything against the government, whistleblowers in the military, they have a higher proportion in the group of TIs than the rest of the population. And, that's just true throughout history. I don't know if I can say much about that. It gets worse with these weapon systems. There's a weapon system called Satan, which is silent assassination through adaptive networks. And it's basically a brain print assassination. You can remote lobotomize people. You can induce schizophrenia. You can make them kill themselves through depression, run a red light. I mean, the trickery is amazing. And again, if you want more details on that, you could read my book. Governments always want to find the outlying thinkers. I think everyone in the room is an outlying thinker, I'll be honest with you. And I call it the sheeple effect. They want everyone to march in line, think the same, buy the same things. And it makes governing people easier. It's not good for the human race. You need diversity of thought for innovation and diversity of genetics. That's why evolution did it. It's important for cataclysmic evolutionary events. And controlling mass media and politicians. The Russians had a theory back in the 70s, and this colonel said we were having a psychotronic war between Russia and the United States, and they were both beaming each other with microwaves over the population. And it was supposed to subdue the population, as if we were the aggressor, is what they said. But the Russians had a theory of they could control 10,000 people in the United States. They could control the outcome and direction of the entire country. And I'm sure that's probably true. And so if you can control people's emotions and associations, having a binary system, Democrats and Republicans, really isn't democracy, but it makes us feel like, we have one-ply toilet paper versus two, we have choice. But it's a way to divert true democracy and choice if your emotions are being manipulated so subtly that you wouldn't even know it. You can control religions. I already talked about the voice of God weapon. This is your God. Lay down your arms. And because of the spying capabilities of this technology, you can acquire blackmail on politicians. You can control financial markets. The list goes on. Let me check the time here. 6:40. Okay. Diagnostics and monitoring is an application. Because the electrical systems of the body can be read, from the activity of the brain through the nervous system. Even the heart is an electrical system. And so, again, the U.S. always points the finger at the Russians. They're developing a remote control heart attack weapon. Well, now that actually exists. You can change the heart's functioning just like you can of the brain. the rhythms that will cause arrhythmias, and if you have a weakened heart, can cause heart failure. I don't know if that's what happened to Dr. Fred Bell after he did the Jesse Ventura show, but it might be possible. And I'll try to get through this quickly. I know I'm running a little late here. Accelerated healing has been talked about with Dr. Becker, the body electric. I'm going to skip through some of this. Oh, post-traumatic stress disorder. So I talked to a couple soldiers. They became TIs. They had post-traumatic stress disorder, and they said that their experimentation was to make them laugh all the time. They heard a laugh track in their head, and they said that they got relief from that. So maybe they're experimenting with trying to relieve post-traumatic stress disorder. You could obviously use this for antidepressants. Much of the country is on antidepressants. We don't know what the long-term effects are of these drugs, but imagine if you could turn a knob, press a button. I want to feel happier right now, or I want to be serious, or I want to go to sleep. But see, and the problem with that is it's sort of like the slot machines, that it's a runaway process. Makes me feel good, press a button, and if that makes you feel good all the time, you just keep pressing the button. So there has to be regulations about it. And then behavior modification. The CIA called their program behavior modification. So we could use it to quit smoking, lose weight, maybe drug addiction rehabilitation. I mean, a lot of potential applications. One TI told me that they could not get drunk, that they were running some sort of signal on him that no matter how much he drank, he could not get drunk. And that was actually in the list of 26 different drugs that the CIA was asked to create in the beginning, is something so that you would not get drunk. So they're running the same experiments, but they're just using electromagnetic entrainments of the brain instead. I like this one, cures for sensory privation. Those who have voice to skull, I don't know who's out there, but they imagine if it were a good voice. And I know one guy that he thinks he's talking to God, and I told him, no, that's not good. But it's a positive experience for him rather than a negative. So you can imagine if you're lonely and you're living alone, all your kids have died, and et cetera, that might actually be a good companion for you, your own personal Jesus, so to speak.
It's better than the psychic car.
Yeah, cheaper. Yeah. I'll just move on, try to wrap this up. Entertainment. Oh, this will be fun. So this is right out of Total Recall, but this is truly part of the capabilities of full control of the human mind. Is you can change, they called it the ego trip in Total Recall, but you have virtual vacation, sort of an awake, dreamlike state. And we humans need vacations for whatever reason, get away from what we do. And so that's going to be in the future. Memory implants. So there was a movie called Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. It was also a book. But you break up with your ex and it bothers you, well, they can just zap those memories away. So, I don't know if that's good. I don't know if it's bad. I'm not discussing ethics here. But, and virtual and safe sex. That's kind of a depressing topic, but I've interviewed. No. Let me finish. The depressing part is where this information came from. Is, I've interviewed like at least 900 TIs, and they're generally very depressing. They've been tortured for many years, and what's very common in the monarch breakdown process is simulated rape, and that's what splits the personality. It creates trauma. But anyway, that they can even do that shows that the whole industry could potentially form of sex industry and altered states. So think of the drug cartels. We have, enough problems with drugs in this country, but that you can create synthetic drugs that stimulate the mind in different ways. How are you going to regulate that? It's just information being piped into the brain. So that's going to be a future issue. And, okay, last slide. And then it kind of gets, you think in the big picture, that, Germany does this. Every country wants to dominate the world, and it's called social or cultural engineering. And using these weapon systems, literally altering people's minds or killing the ones that you can't alter, is a form of eugenics, genocide. But because you're doing it with minds and not genetics, it's called menticide. And I think it's an ongoing silent Holocaust. This is worldwide, what a lot of TIs are talking about. This is worldwide. They also call it intelligent design, or memetics engineering, a term coined by Richard Dawkins. That memes are the ideas that we speak, we pass in conversation. They mutate, they mate, and they're passed on. So I always say this century, 21st century, will be known as the age of spiritual machines and soulless men. And I always like to give some good quotes to end. We cannot leave governance to our leaders. We cannot leave news to the corporate media. We must be the voice of truth. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Powerlessness and silence go together. We should use our privileged positions not as a shelter from the world's reality, but as a platform from which to speak. Thank you.